myself now. The other coach, the assistant coach, Travis Smith, could not be here. My name's Greg Sammons, and I'm the head coach. We're both level 3 coaches with USA Archery, and we have been doing this for about 2 years plus. There was like kind of a half year there where we were just kind of getting going, and so this is really our second real full year as a team. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what our team's going to consist of, what types of events, what you could expect. I want to go back. I know I put a lot of information in the email, but I actually want to talk through like what you kind of need to either have or be able to do in order to make sure this is a good fit for you to move forward. And I also want to just mention that my normal day job, so to speak, I'm the vice president for student affairs. So my office actually shares this back wall. So if anyone ever needed to come see me, I'm right over there. So I'm on the president's cabinet, work for the president, and the other assistant coach works for our heating plant. So he's actually right now he's swinging on night shifts. So he's got more days off per se, but he's also working nights. So his schedule is kind of all over the map. We make it work though. So I want to go through what this is. First and foremost, I'm assuming everybody, if you're in here, you may actually already have your bow here. If not, I'll just throw out that reminder. You can bring your bow. We're actually the only college in SUNY that has an archery team. We're the only college in the SUNY system that I'm aware of that actually has this setup, and it works really well. You can bring your bow, you just have to keep it in a case. The permit, it's kind of a shrunk down version of that permit form. You stop into our UPD anytime, 24/7, they'll give you the bow permit. You just got to keep it in a case. Most people on the team, I think, have vehicles. If you do, we just kind of have a bows, no arrows policy, so you keep your arrows separated from your bow, and that prevents situations. You leave the room, go have dinner, roommate decides that looks really cool, and nothing good comes of that. So we want to make sure those two things are kept separated for the purposes of storage. But also, as many of you know, if you've shot archery for a while, bows kept in vehicles are not a good recipe either. It's bad for the bearings, it's bad for the bow. So that's the reason why we have the policy to make sure the bows can come into climate control. So that's a little bit about that. I think some of you knew that. I want to talk a little bit about the differences between the club and the team. I have that graphic up there. The graphic in the upper right is the the Archers of Alfred Club logo, which remains, and that has remained since it's actually the original logo from 2015. Club actually started with some architecture students. Interestingly, the club's origin was somebody who never shot a bow. They just thought they thought it would be really interesting to have a club and have the ability for people to learn archery. That's actually the origin, only about 3.5 years ago. Once the club established though, we had people that really enjoyed archery kind of come in and say, I want to do this and want to do it competitively. That's sort of a different group. And so what we had is sort of this 2-group format, and that is that we have the club and we also have the team. The club is open to all students, so anybody can join our club, and we have, within that club, we've got people that have never shot a bow. So we had an event, if you saw that archery tag, we had people basically playing dodgeball with bows and arrows. I'm quite sure many of them, that was literally the first time they've ever released an arrow of any kind, and it was pretty fun. It was fun watching them. For people in this room that have shot competitively, you may actually have no interest whatsoever in doing that, or may want to try it once or twice, but it's not what you're interested in. So we understand that. So we realize there's really 3 levels. There's the people that want to try archery. There's people that have bows. Maybe you want to have access to a range to have the ability to get ready for bow season. You're a bow hunter. That's cool. You want to go to some of the local 3D shoots. That's cool. Again, could be a recreational member. And then there's the team. And when I say the team, if I was to distill that into really what it means in one sentence, the team is a group that will travel to events that compete against other colleges under the USA Archery Collegiate Archery Program. It's a long sentence, but it's still one sentence. That's how I would describe the team. And so we're going to talk about that. So if you want to be on the team, these are the things. There's really 4 things that you should have to be able to proceed. First, you should have a personal bow setup that fits you. So if you have a bow, it can be your hunting bow. You don't have to have a anodized target riser and have a $300 sight with a magnified lens and a 34-inch stabilizer. You don't have to have any of that. You do need to have a bow that fits you. You need to have arrows that are spined to your bow. You should have all the working accessories that go with that, or ability to get that pretty quickly. And there are different classes in the competition. So a hunter class is a very competitive class in the USA Archery events, and that would typically be your hunting. It would be probably very close to what you have right now. You can make some accessory modifications to give yourself some advantages and still be compliant in that class. But again, I'm going to say there that probably what you have is fine, and you don't really need to buy much. So just want to throw that out there. And I would ask though that you ask yourself, because this is I think typically I've seen this happen. Would you have the ability to replace arrows? Because if you're going to be shooting more, it just kind of comes with the target. You may take out your own arrow as you get better, and you smash into the back of your arrow, and one of them's gone. Or we're in a competition, and another shooter, if it's 3D, you've got groups all shooting at one target, and if you're first in the group, the other members of the group are shooting at the back arrow. You could lose some arrows. Things go with arrows. Things happen, and so would you have the ability to make sure you could get new arrows if you need to? Also, if your arrow rest broke or your hunting sight, really just crapped out, could you replace it? Could you actually get yourself a new sight mid-season? And if you realized your strings, or I'm looking at your strings and I tell you your strings are really shot, they're really frayed, you've got a lot of stretch, you really need to look at replacing those, would you have the ability to put down $100 on strings and cables if you had to, or call home and get some help with that? Like, would you have that type of support? So I throw that out there just to ask yourself. I think those are important things if you're going to embark on something where you're traveling any kind of distance to actually compete. Those are things you'd want to have squared away. So this doesn't have to do with being a recreational member. This has to do with if you were going to make that jump to actually traveling and competing. Everybody, myself included, loves new bows. I would say I'm borderline addicted to getting a new bow. However, I want to say it again, you really don't need, I've had a couple people on the team in the past that have sort of shown up with a new, so all of a sudden sort of surprised. We're like 2 months in and shown up with a bow. Had we had a conversation, it's not that anything wrong with that bow, but they didn't necessarily buy the best bow for the purpose. They ended up buying a new bow, or parents bought them a new bow because they were excited, and it wasn't necessarily the best equipment choice. Still served them, but something may have served them better. So I'll throw that out there too. If you get farther along and you were participating with the team, I would ask that you maybe run it by either myself, assistant coach Smith, one of the guys that has been around, and get some advice. Second thing you need to do to be able to go through, there should be sort of some baseline skill set that you've got. And I don't want to put scores up there because the scores themselves are not necessarily important now, and I don't think you'll have context for those. So instead, I'd like to do just kind of give you something that everybody can relate to regarding scores. The first one, and I'll get into the 3 seasons, but the first season, which is right now, is 3D, which means you're shooting the animal type foam targets with all different shapes and sizes, varying distance. So if I was to say, are you ready to think about competing and potentially going for the team that would travel, I would say first and foremost, if you can put one of those targets out there, whether it's a small deer target or a turkey target or any of those foam targets, if you can put one out at about 40 yards, and if you look at the standard size paper plates, they're about 8 inches. They make 10 inches and 8 inches. If you were to put the standard size kind of 8-inch paper plate out there at about 40 yards and you were hitting that consistently, you were not really coming outside of that. And then as the target moves closer, your groups are getting getting closer and closer. You've got a good starting point for 3D archery. When we move to indoor season, which is really right around Thanksgiving, so when we get in November, that's really our one kind of break where there's actually some classes going on, but we kind of take a break. Right when November 1st hits, we've got a little lull in activity, and during that time between there and Thanksgiving, the team is pretty much idle. There's a lot going on, and for those people that are bow hunters, that's kind of prime time for the hunting season, and so we kind of take a little bit of a break there. It's between seasons. Once we get coming back from the Thanksgiving break, we kick into indoor season, and with indoor season, we really start heavily using. At that point, daylight savings makes daylight pretty much is gone by 5:30. And so you get out of class and it's starting to get dark already. We've got a dedicated indoor range, and we start using that range. And so you'll be able to shoot indoors. That gives us the ability to have indoor leagues and do a lot of indoor practice. So when we switch to indoor season, everything is pretty much at 20 yards. So if you can shoot at 20 yards and you can hold it in about a 4 to 5 inch circle consistently at 20 yards, you're in the game for indoor. You can hang in there with indoor, and you can just keep getting better. But that's sort of a baseline coming into this. If you wanted to compete, you really kind of need to be at that level as a starting point to be ready to be considered for a travel team. And then lastly, when we get to outdoor, an outdoor season, really, man, it depends on the weather, because in New York or whether it's Massachusetts, any of us that are in the East region for USA Archery, the winters, sometimes they cut loose at the end of March, and April is beautiful. We've had 80-degree days. We've had days where it has literally, like, snowflakes are flying at commencement, you know? So where winter ends is anybody's guess, but hopefully it ends at the end of March. In April, it may not be 80 degrees, but at least we're getting outside. When we get outside for that, you should be able to hit, and I'll say one of those really big paper plates, like a good 10.5-inch paper plate. You could stick that out there at 55 yards and just kind of dial it in. Now, a lot of people in here, you may not have right now a 55-yard, like say you're using 100 pins, you may not have a 55-yard pin. That's fine. I'm telling you, like, most people that started doing this didn't either. You just kind of figure out, we'll help get the site set, we'll figure out where it is. Last spring, Josh, another one of the archers that graduated Austin, and Jacob Pollock, who's here, those three guys went, and first time we'd actually competed in an outdoor target, and they ended up taking second place in the hunter division using fixed pins. So that's out at 55 yards. So if you can just hang in there at about a 10-inch paper plate, you're gonna score in a realm that's pretty good for competition. So that's just a little bit about skills. Third thing that I think you would need, this is the easiest of them, by the way, you need to join USA Archery, and don't do this yet. Do this if you advance in and you want to start competing and we decide you're a good fit for this. You would be a full-time student. For those that are returning students or have brought in credits, you've got to have a cum GPA of 2.0. So if you've got a 2.0 GPA and you're full-time, that means you're eligible. And you can log in, we would give you the link, you log in, you actually would become a member with USA Archery as a collegiate member. That's $40. That would be a cost you would have. And then with that, there's an eligibility form. The eligibility form is you telling them, yes, I'm full-time, I have a 2.0, you're verifying that, and then all of a sudden you're in for the purposes of this one. So this one can be accomplished in 5 minutes. And then the fourth thing you need is I would say, is a type of commitment. This is for the team that is traveling. Type of commitment, and that means a bunch of different things. One would be that you want to practice even when you don't necessarily feel like it. You're putting in the work. You actually are willing to put in the work to get better. Another key point of commitment is the ability to potentially, if you want to travel, the ability to potentially contribute some towards your own costs. And that was an example. Jake and Josh, we went last year. Do you remember? I don't remember, but you remember off the top of your head how much that kind of cost for you guys?
Like $40–50.
That one was, we went to Williamsport, Pennsylvania for the USA Outdoor Regionals, and that one was, I think it was under $100 when it was all said and done. We did that one pretty economically. Williamsport's nice because we could drive to it. It required an overnight stay in the hotel. The club was able to pick up, or the team was able to pick up the registrations for their entry into the tournament, and I think able to cover the hotel itself. And then they had to pick up meals and a couple other incidental expenses. That one was pretty good. Last year we did USA Archery 3D Collegiate National Championships in Foley, Alabama. That one had more out-of-pocket expenses. As you can imagine, we actually flew a team of 3, and that involved them having their registration was paid for, their hotel was covered. However, they ended up paying for their particular airfare ticket, their airline ticket. So that was, I think, maybe almost close to $400. Did some fundraisers to knock that down a little bit, but I just want to throw it out there so you get an idea what that could look like. It can also mean helping out when the club needs assistance to do an event where we're trying to do, whether it be service or trying to do something. Sometimes showing up for that is part of that commitment. We're waiting on getting the new sample jerseys for 2018. When those come in and we finalize the design, the members of the team will typically then buy, but you keep forever. You would buy your apparel for that. So again, just ask yourself, would you have the means to take that on if you want to pursue it? And then secondly, just kind of ask yourself, if I had discretionary money, would I be willing to put it towards some of this, or would I rather have a PS5? There's no PS5 yet, is there? Or Xbox, whatever. There's no PS5, right? That's next. Is that the next one? All right. All right, so 3 seasons of archery. These are the 3 seasons. There are other types of archery as well. Field archery is a good one example. But these are the 3 that USA Archery Collegiate Archery participates in. These are the 3 we've locked in on. So we're going to go with these 3, and I'm going to breeze through quickly what each 3 is. One thing I want to point out right away, The difference between other sports, I think, and this particular archery sport with USA Archery Collegiate, all the best games are away games for us. Like, so when 3D Archery's, or the 3D Collegiate National Championships is in Foley, Alabama, it's an awesome event, but it's not a home event. There's no, so that's sort of the same for everybody. There is no home team to Foley, Alabama. So the best tournaments typically are going to involve travel. So 3D season. I mentioned earlier, 3D, they could literally put a target at 3 yards or 7 yards, like really close to check your pin, and it'd be ironic. All of a sudden you're using your 35-yard pin on the target, even though it's 7 yards, because of the fact your arrow hasn't had a chance to get away from the bow yet. Out to, if you were an open class shooter, it could be out at 50 yards. If you're hunter class, max distance might be 40 yards. And those are the types of distances, and they're going to vary them. At the 3D National Championships, we're in Alabama. Alabama is flat, so you're not dealing with a lot of terrain. But if you were at other tournaments in 3D, you might also be dealing with up and down. They may have you get up on a platform. They may have you shoot where they've taken ground away from you, which is when they have like a ravine in between you and the target and you can't judge yardage. Some are known yardage, some are unknown yardage, where you have to actually guess the distance. So those are, that's the basic game. But I listed up here a bunch of opportunities that you have to do 3D. I think that for the most part, what I found in this year, you can always have an exception, but I think for the most part, people really like 3D a lot. They like it, probably they find it to be the most fun to do, probably because the targets are changing, the distances are changing. So up here, when you see all those things listed in black, those are absolutely wonderful practice opportunities for somebody who's on the team. But everything up there in black is also something that is completely open to a recreational member of the archery club. So going to Dansville is $5. It's 30 minutes away, and they're having shoots every single Sunday morning. They're 15 target shoots. They only take you about an hour, hour and a half. They're a lot of fun. They set up a good course. And then the last 2 weeks of September, they're 30 target shoots. Maybe they're maybe $7 or $8, but that's a great place to go close and get in some 3D. Could be a team member wanting to get in that practice. Could be a recreational club member wanting to get in that practice. These other ones I've listed are all upcoming shoots in our area. They have different costs. So like the Tollsville one, I think is $8. That's again, he has that course set up every night. So if you were to decide, as soon as I got done talking, if you were to jump in a truck and want to go shoot 3D, his course is set up until dark. So you could go shoot that course. See me if you want information about where to find him. Seneca Lake, Branchport, those shoots are coming up. They're a little more expensive. They're like $30. I think one might be $40, but they're really high caliber shoots. They're very good. I know Jake has shot those several times, and those are great courses. And I think you're going this Sunday to shoot?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that Seneca's or yeah, Seneca's is this Sunday.
That's this weekend.
Barrett's, if you've never been to Barrett's is the bow shop I think we'd all wish we kind of had in our hometown. It's one of the good ones. It has indoor 3D range right attached to a pretty large pro shop, and they're down in Elmira. They've got an indoor shoot that's hunter class setups at 11 o'clock in the morning, not the 22nd of September. That'd be the day before, for example, Dansville would also have a 30 target shoot. So all those are available. The two that I have in red are, again, this gets back to the team. This would be travel team only for people that are actually wanting to go to the USA Archery 3D. The first is a regional. It's in Nelsonville, Ohio, which is where Hocking College is. They're one of the teams we competed against in the 3D championships last year in Foley. And then in late October, there's the USA Collegiate Archery 3D National Championships. It's back in Foley again. It's ASA rules, meaning you're shooting Mackenzie Delta targets, not the Reinhardt targets. And I'll show an example of why that's different. It's all known yardage, so it's one of those situations where you don't have to judge yardage per se. Those two are ones that we will be targeting. And definitely the 3D National Championships. The regional is new this year. They didn't even have it last year, and I just found out about it a week ago. It just got posted, so we're trying to figure out if we can make that work. Picture on the left, that's last year. Senior Tristan Dool, he graduated this past May. He finished second place in men's open, made the podium. On the right, that was Nick Mest. He also graduated. That's an example of what the competition looked like. Other collegiate athletes behind him waiting their turn. And that's what it looked like in Foley. So in Foley and with ASA shoots, you've got a lane. They've got a lane right that was sort of behind this guy. And off of that, there's a bunch of different target sets. You're only really walking about 20 feet to get to the next target. The group shoot, they walk forward, come back. It keeps everything moving really quickly. It's very organized. What happens at an event like this, on a Saturday, archers shoot, it's sort of individual. You're shooting for your best score, and therefore they have awards for whoever shot the best in their particular class. Depending on how you can have 3 archers per team, and team means what division. So for example, we had 3 members in the open class, in the men's compound class, which is long stabilizers, movable sights, and we ended up being seated second. And so Sunday is actually a team round, and it's in an open area where there's spectators watching. And in that team round, you're shooting together, side by side. You're shooting at a target. Your opponent, another college, has their 3 members. They're shooting at an identical target that is next to yours, side by side. And it's an elimination bracket. So we went in seated second. We ended up coming out 4th, unfortunately. And what you see here, that's an IBO. So if you imagine that there's an animal around that, essentially, that would be the vital ring of an animal target. That would be what an ASA scoring ring, for the most part, would look like. You can see up in that upper right, you've got that green 14 ring, and that has to be called. So there's some strategy where somebody could call that they want to go for that. And there's some other rules that I won't get into. They're not important for this meeting. So in terms of how we're going to manage 3D season travel team selection, which would again be potentially those 2 events that I just talked about that were in red, the two USA Archery events at the bottom, whether it be the regional and definitely the nationals. So for team selection, we're looking at probably 3 or 6 archers. Why 3 or 6? Because the teams that get entered are again, you're entering a team as either hunter class, open class, or you could have a hunter class and an open class, but those are 3-member teams per class. So it doesn't make sense to bring 4 or 7. You could, but it basically means one of those people is not, somebody's odd personnel. They're not able to shoot in the team round because it wasn't in that derivative of 3. So this is how that works. The way we're going to set this up, we're going to take, these are the parameters with how we're going to decide, because ultimately I want to put this out there so somebody doesn't feel like, why didn't I go, or why was I left out? We're going to take average scores, which is why when I listed those other events, we're going to figure out what events you can go to turn in scores. We're going to look at scores. We are going to look at the subjective variable of, have you been around? Have you been actively engaged, participating, working hard? And then the other parameter is, are you able to invest? Like, in other words, would you have the resources? So if you were selected to be invited to go and represent Alfred State at the 3D championships, we figured out this is what the team can support. This is what you'd have to come up with. Again, I used last year as an example. Last year they had to come up with a plane ticket. And then I think maybe 2 other meals. Could you come up with that plane ticket? And if you look at it, you're like, you know what, I'd love to go, but that's kind of out of the question for me at the moment. And that's cool. Then that would just be something we would want to know, so that that would mean that we would move on to the next, which I'll get into a couple scenarios like that. In this season, if we have to break a tie, we get to literally a situation where you've got 2 archers that are very committed, they've worked hard, they're engaged, they're participating, they're doing everything they should. The scores are essentially the same. We would then both say, yeah, I can go, I can totally go. We'd break a tie with some kind of shoot-off event. I have a different type of tiebreaker for the other seasons, but I just want to throw it out there. So that's how we'll select this. Want to move to indoor season. Indoor season will start, I mentioned this, at the end of November, and it goes through March. This is shot at 18 meters, aka 20 yards. And so this is going to be based on some campus-based leagues. We will be able to do this right at our range, so no real cost to you whatsoever. You can get totally involved in shooting these leagues indoors. Barrett's has a lot of indoor shoots. In fact, they've got one on October 6th. We'll still sort of be in 3D mode, but they've got one that's Lancaster style. They also have one on December 8th. Both of those are sort of charity-based tournaments, but it's good competition to get there, shoot against people that are unfamiliar to you, crowded shooting lines. And then we get to the big indoor event for our purposes. That is the USA Archery's Collegiate Indoor Nationals. USA Archery for this event breaks up, even though it's nationals, they break it up into regional locations. So there's like 6 locations where they actually all are having nationals. Pretty close dates, but they're not even all on the same day. The scores all get loaded up into a system, and that's how they determine who wins. And so we would be doing Collegiate Indoor Nationals. The dates right now are already posted. It'll be February 22 to 24. We don't have to pick this one, but I think this one makes sense. It's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and so we would lock onto this and take a team to compete in this. There are other events that are really exciting. They're great. Lancaster has a world-class shoot called the Lancaster Archery Classic. That's something that some of our members have shot in the past, but it's sort of an on-your-own kind of thing. You could get together with somebody and say, hey, let's go shoot Lancaster. Pay your registration fee, carpool together, do all that. It wouldn't necessarily, because they have there's no collegiate division to determine any kind of collegiate winner. There's no intercollegiate competition, so it wouldn't be part of our club funded. NFA Indoor Nationals, all of those are fantastic. Our parameters would be, first and foremost, can we compete in it in our collegiate division? In terms of selecting that team, that's drivable. Lancaster, Pennsylvania is drivable, so there's no reason not to take, for example, 6 archers and get a couple teams going. And that would be something that we would either use a van, or we would figure out what vehicles we're going to use. We would be driving to that. How do we select that team? That's a great way. We can totally do scores right on campus because we have the ability to shoot regulation indoor matches. So we can do scores right here, use the same criteria as have you shown up, have you worked hard, have you participated, have you been engaged? Can you invest whatever those costs are? They certainly would be less because you're not talking about any kind of airfare. Would you be able to afford an investment to offset some expenses for the event? And I'd say breaking a tie. If everybody met those criteria, we'd break a tie off GPA. It's just the simplest way. If there's that 7th person and we're trying to decide between 6 and 7, we break it off GPA. Outdoor season, we get to late March, weather breaks, it starts to get nice. We move into outdoor target season. We've got 2 events that I think both are extremely doable this year. And these are actually, again, this was last year for the first time we gave a shot. Josh, Jacob, and Austin went down and did really well. The USA Archery Collegiate Outdoor Regionals is this year. This is tentative. This is literally hot off the presses. Tentatively going to be commingled with the Adam Wheatcroft Memorial, which is another outdoor target tournament. They're going to just have the 2 happening at the same time. This would be at James Madison University, tentatively, in Harrisonburg, Virginia. That's drivable as well, so we've got another drivable tournament, and that would be, they've already announced dates of April 13th and 14th of next spring, and that is followed by the USA Archery Collegiate Outdoor National Championships. Last year, those were in Florida. This year, they're going to be in Dublin, Ohio. That's drivable on May 16th through the 19th. So that's the Outdoor National Championships for collegiate. So those are 2. You can see I've got those in red because that's going to be travel team. That's going to be invitation. Those are some pictures there from the outdoor regionals from last year. You can get an idea on the left what that shooting line looks like. You've got all the classes kind of together. It is timed. Again, I mentioned the recurves are shooting at 70 meters. Their paper target's larger. The compound shooters are shooting at an 80 centimeter target. The target ahead is right there, so you can kind of see. You can see the numbers on there. That's kind of how they score that. For reference, that 10 ring. The 10 ring is not the entire goal. The 10 ring is there's an inside circle there that represents 10. That 10 ring is about just over 3 inches. So that gives you some context. Target's pretty good size. So when I say big, I would almost say, would you call it I'll go large pizza. I mean, I'd say it's like a large pizza kind of target. And so that gives you an idea what that looks like. We'll actually certainly either give you one or have you get access to these so you can get an idea. We've got time for this because this is outdoor target. But those are ones we are targeting for this year. So you can see five USA Archery collegiate events that we have our eyes on that will represent travel team opportunities for people on the team. Again, that's the pictures from that event this past April. How I would select that, we do some scores. So once we can get outside, we will do scoring rounds. Those will be right on campus. We'll actually go ahead and have some people you will compete to try to get those travel slots to see how you're shooting in that event. You could have someone that is just killing it at indoor and moves there, and the outdoor target is not their game. It could work the other direction. Again, you could have somebody that's just phenomenal in outdoor target but doesn't like that close range indoor target shooting or how that feels. And so people may excel at different seasons. Same basic criteria, and again, I would break it off GPA because once you get to winter where you've got a fall semester set of grades or you've got that, it's a way to do a tiebreaker. I don't actually think we'd have many ties, but I want to at least make sure I'm upfront about how it would be the cleanest way to break a tie. I want to go through some what ifs really quickly. So what if you were interested in only one of those seasons? What if you were totally about 3D and you have no interest in shooting in the winter? That could be because you're just not interested. It could be because you're on another sport. That's okay. That's absolutely fine if you want to kind of engage for just part of the season. I think when I mentioned to you before, I will say that like when I talked about team selection, one of the criteria would be what kind of work has the person put in. So if somebody's been there through 3D, they've been there putting in a ton of work through indoor, we get to outdoor target, they're still there putting in work. Somebody else comes in, very similar score, but that was what they were only interested in outdoor target. They just kind of showed up in the spring. I would, for a travel team who I'm going to support, I'd probably give the nod to the person who's been putting it in all year. So that's an example. But I also don't want to say that you can't engage for certain seasons. You can't, like if you want to just do this for indoor because you're on the baseball team and you really can only really do 3D, or you can only do a season that doesn't directly conflict with the spring sport, I get it. And that's okay. What if you were not selected for one of the travel slots? And when I say not selected, it really comes down to the club has a specific budget, so we're just like in if you're, we all know how much money we have in our bank account. We've got to spend it wisely to make it last. So when we look at how much we can afford to support each particular team that goes, that's the reason why we would limit it. It's not because we would prefer to bring a huge team, but when we've got to limit it, there'll be a line somewhere. And so what happens if you're outside that line? You could go, if you decided, all right, I realize I don't get the assistance, I don't actually get this part paid for, but I still want to go with the team and compete. You could, if you have the resources to say, I'm going to do it because I want the experience, because this experience will make me better for the following season, and then I will definitely, if you look at it that way, you could do it that way. What if you were invited, or an archer is invited to go but declines? I will have that lineup, like I'll have that list. Somebody all of a sudden, I can't go, I don't have any resources to be able to pull off that ticket to get to Foley. I'll move right down the line to whoever that next rank was, and then say, can you do this? And then we'll fill it in. So that's the way we'll approach that. How many slots will be offered or can go? I mentioned already, we're going to try to do it because USA Archery's events run off teams of 3. So we'll try to always do it. And can we fill a hunter class of 3? Can we fill an open class of 3? Can we fill what these look like? They have mixed teams. So if we have male and female archers, we can have a mixed team of male and female both competing in, for example, hunter class. So that could be a team we fill. So those are things that we'll look at. And then the other one is it drivable or do we have to fly? So Foley is totally different than Pennsylvania. It makes sense then for Pennsylvania. If we could fit people in a van, let's fill the van. Let's fill the van and go. It's a whole different ballgame when we're talking about flying somewhere. So that also dictates it. And then how can we drive together to events that are off campus? I'll talk about vans in a minute. The Senate does allow us to reserve vans. We will need van drivers, so I'll talk about that in a minute. I want to talk a little bit about recognition and awards that you can earn if you were a member of the team. First is All-American status. The top 25% of archers in each division and class. If you participate in those indoor nationals, which are in February, and then the outdoor collegiate championships, which were in May, and you're in the top 25% of the finishing in that, you could have All-American status. And they combine it by combining the scores from the qualification round from that May event, and then your combined score from the indoors in February. Take the top quarter; those people are designated, can get All-American status. There's also All-American academic team. If you've got a GPA of 3.5 through the fall term, and you're eligible to compete in the spring of 19, they would take the top 25% of the divisions and classes from indoor nationals, and then rank them by GPA. And so they will then assign who made All-American academic team. That's a nice national honor for somebody if that's of importance to you and you'd like to have that. All-region team would be top 25% of the archers in our region. We are in the East region, which is, I don't remember how many states, but it's going to be Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, a lot of that, the East Coast, in the Northeast. We're the East region. If you're in that region, and you participate in both the U.S. National Indoors and the Regional Outdoor Collegiate Championships, they calculate that, taking the combined score from that, and that regional outdoor championship, which I mentioned will be at James Madison, and that will be who they define as the all-region team. That'd be five folks. And then Archer of the Year. If you've done all 3 seasons, so you competed in the USA Archery 3D Collegiate National Championships, you did the Indoor National Championships, and you did the National Outdoor Championships, they'll take that. And if you placed, for example, first, and first, you won them all, you'd have a score of 3, because you had a 1 + 1 + 1, you'd have a 3. If you had the lowest score, you'd be in the running for Archer of the Year. And they take that, and there is an award for people by gender and division. The overall Archer of the Year would be what I just described, would actually take those placements. That's my understanding of the USA Archery award system. So that's all the one events. I do want to make one other mention about the Winter Camp Classic. We've gone to that each year for the last few, I think for 2 or 3 years. I think it's, maybe it's been 2 years. Okay, so this coming year will be our 3rd year. That is at the Turning Stone Casino. We decided last year, actually, that would kind of become where alumni also gather. So at this point now, we've graduated some archers that I think are interested in coming back and still shooting. So we plan on going there and then also inviting our alumni back. That's in March 19. It's indoor 3D, known yardage. And that's also an opportunity if it continues the way we have done it. We've actually volunteered, so we've helped run the course from either a safety perspective, target setups, whatever they've needed help with. Ethan and Jacob and Josh and these guys, and Jacob, you were there too last year. So we had a pretty, I don't know, we had 8 or 9 people that went to that. This is also open to anybody in both the rec club that wants to go get a taste of tournament competition, and then also the team. It's not a collegiate competition event, but it's close enough. What happens in the past has been we have volunteered, and that has allowed you your entrance fee into that has actually been either covered, or they've covered some of the lodging because of the volunteerism, and then you've had that part covered for you. So that's a great tournament picture there of that. I know last year Jacob made the shoot off in your division for that, and so that's a really quality event. So we'll definitely want to hit that up again. That's again March. A little bit of when that comes an off-season event, because we're just about clearing out of indoor, kind of getting ready for outdoor targets. Kind of cool to just all of a sudden change pace and get some 3D. So what can you expect from me as a coach or the other coach? We are volunteer coaches, so I mentioned what I do for a living, so to speak, out at the beginning of the meeting, and what Travis, the other coach, does. We will try to help kind of guide, facilitate, and assist, particularly with organizational issues. So this presentation, helping create structure for the club, helping manage media for the club, helping travel logistics, helping registrations, make sure that I'm organizing you to keep you moving in the right direction. Absolutely, that's something that I want to do. I will help organize a weekly practice of some sort to try to keep you guys moving forward towards your goal, and I usually focus that on whatever I consider to be the next event. So if the next event for me that I'm concerned of regarding the travel team is 3D regional or 3D national, I'm going to set up practices that I think are improving skills to get you to compete better at that particular event. I will assist individual archers with training goals outside of the practices, so if I could see that there's something I think you should be working on, I'll help you work on those goals. And then at times, again, being honest, I may not be able to be at every practice just due to the nature of my position, and so I may ask the team members to step up, and if we have a team captain this year, if we get to that point, we'll have the captain potentially run the practice and expect that members are taking care of that. Asking in advance not to be frustrated by what we are not. We are not set up as personal coaches. So, for example, if there's an expectation that we kind of, hey, I want you to give me lessons, like I want kind of unlimited lessons to get better. I'm just not. Unfortunately, it's just a time issue. It's not a desire issue. I don't have time to be able to do that. We're also not intramurals. Or sometimes there's a feeling like, well, is the team kind of like intramurals where you like sign up for it? No, we're not intramurals. The travel team in particular is going to be selected. So unlike intramurals, that's not what this is. We're also not able to serve as bow technicians. So there are some people on the team that are, I think, pretty gifted in this regard, regarding whether it be string and cable changes, whether it be tying in a drop-away arrow rod. There's people that will do that, but in terms of like coming to the coaches and saying, hey, can you swap out my cable set or my string set? can't do it. I can refer you to we have some good shops, not terribly far away, that we can refer you to them to get reliable help. We can't serve as a store to buy items from. That said, sometimes we will do group ordering through Lancaster Archery Supply, so we're able to get a bit of a discount off things through Lancaster Archery. I don't want to do that on a daily basis, so like I don't want to order just a set of nocks and then the next day order, but in intervals, if we have something that folks want, we can kind of stack it up, and then I can do a group bulk order and get that in. And then also, in terms of travel logistics, I will help set up, particularly lodging. I will do some of that shopping to make sure we're getting the best deal, either through the tournament hotel, or I'll do a little bit of magic and try to beat the tournament hotel price and get us the best possible deal for lodging. That said, I'm actually out of the van. I want to be out of the van business. So when I talked about vans earlier, one of the challenges we have our number one van driver, who I don't think wants to be our number one van driver every single time, Ethan Frederick, who is also the vice president of the club. I should have said this at the beginning. Josh is the president of the club. Jacob is the secretary of the club. Jacob Pollock is the treasurer of the club. Jacob Husknecht is the student senate rep of the club. If you were paying attention, we have 3 Jacobs out of 5 on the e-boards. We're trying to come up with nicknames for these guys. But we don't have like positions of van drivers. If you've got a valid New York State, I think you have to have New York State driver's license. If you have a valid New York State driver's license and a not horrible travel record or driving record, by going right down this hallway and around the corner, there's an office there and a gentleman named Tyler Ribble, and you could become a van driver, and it would be tremendously helpful, not to me because I'm not riding in the van. It would be tremendously helpful for y'all because you would be able to have access. Even when I mentioned earlier, like those shoots in Dansville or the shoot in Branchport or one of the ones we have in Barrett's, being able to get a van would be, you don't have to, but what happens in the absence of the van is you guys are just kind of figuring it out. Like you're kind of like, hey, I got a car, I've got gas, $5 from you, I think I could fit your bow in the back, let's go. But you can't fit, can I ride with you? It's that, you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. If you want to do that, you can do that. It's some ways how it seems like it's worked for some events, but there's other events that are big enough where having a van would be pretty nice. And so it only really will happen if we get drivers.
Especially being that a majority of our competitions are drivable, especially with the schedule this year. I was working out. Having someone being able to drive just Foley is really the only one that we'll be flying to. If we can drive to everything, that'd be great. So.
Yeah, there's 4. Those are 4 national level events that are all drivable, but we'll need to have van drivers. Even if Ethan even if Ethan decides I want to do this, I want to go. I wouldn't necessarily feel good about Ethan having to just be the only, like always be the driver. I don't think that would really be really cool, or maybe, I don't know about whether that's the best practice for him to be behind the wheel all the way to Virginia with no relief. So I want to work that out ahead of time, so just throw that out there. We are considered a club sport, so whereas football or baseball or basketball, track, swimming, those are varsity sports, we fall in the club sport status. Club sport status is also shared with our college's men's hockey team. And so, for example, with men's hockey, members of that hockey team, my understanding, they also kind of kick in some financial resources to basically the equivalent of they actually buy ice time that they have to pay for the Civic Arena in Olean. And they do that so that they're covering, by doing that, each member is contributing to the practices that they need, the officials for their games, their jerseys, all that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of the expression skin in the game, and that's something that as a club sport is pretty common. Some of the other archery teams that we would be even competing, even Texas A&M, which is a tremendously powerful archery team, has events where some are completely paid for, some are subsidized, and they have archers paying some of those costs. And I've compared notes with other coaches, and this is pretty normal in terms of how it's normally set up. So just want to throw that out there. There are 3 types of team or coaching sessions that you could expect. One would be planning sessions where I want to just sort of talk through what are your goals, what are the team's goals. Training sessions, we may lock in on a specific skill. So if I want to focus on aiming drills, we may actually do a session entirely about that or some other type of skill, and then actually work on that in long format. Or there'd be group practice, which would be we're actually taking a set of skills, we're working on it together. We may shoot around a 3D together. We may do something that is for a purpose. So it wouldn't just be open range with uniforms on. It would be something we're actually doing for a reason. The coaching approach that we use, again, I mentioned level 3 before, and that's USA Archery's coaching certification system. We use the national training system, which is a specific approach to how you can execute a really good shot. So it's a multi-step process to execute a clean archery shot. We're using that, implemented by Coach Lee, who's the U.S. national coach who coaches the Olympic teams. It is a process-oriented approach, which is what we use. And we also, again, I mentioned we believe in a very purposeful practice as opposed to just sort of random. We're not as worried about rep count, like did you shoot 100 arrows? I'm more concerned with whether you shot 15 arrows and did this, this, and this, as opposed to total quantity. The initial team selection, depending on how many people are interested and where we stand, if we have to cap it, and I say if, I probably will cap this whole thing around 12 just because of the size of our range, particularly when we get towards indoor. We've got an indoor range, and I've sort of looked at it and felt it when we've had about 10, and I feel like 10 gets pretty crowded. I feel like if we have 12, people can't always be there the same day, so we probably would often end up with 10, which I'm about comfortable with as a cap. Also, quite honestly, the line can technically take 8 shooters, but the shooter on either end is particularly crowded by wall or fence. And I've found that when I look at 6 people on the shooting line, if we're using it for doing indoor practice, it seems to fit. It's full, but it fits, and it's actually pretty standard distance that you would expect at any kind of big indoor tournament. So we're going to do. We're going to probably look at it that way with 12. We may be just fine with that without having to actually let somebody know that right now we've got to only invite these 12. And I just want to say it up front, if we had to cap a practice at that, we will have some sort of competitive format to determine who those 12 are, and then we would cut to make sure we get to that number. If that happens, that does not mean in any way, shape, or form that if for some reason you've got work to do and you're on the bubble of making it into that you should disconnect from the club. All those other events that were in black, 3D events, the use of our range, open range nights are now 6 to 8 p.m. on Thursdays. So when I mentioned purposeful practices, even if it's not a group practice, going down when an open range is happening and deciding, you know what, we were talking about this last week, I'm going to work on this particular, I'm going to work on, it has a part of the actual release. I'm going to actually, maybe you've made a change in your style of release, or you've made a change in how you're going to actually activate your release. Go down there with a specific purpose in mind and take that open range time and actually work on it and be serious about it. So that is how we will look at that in terms of setting up this initial team. So again, remaining archers are in the club. You've got opportunities to compete. Don't feel like you're totally off in the woods. There's kind of some blur between club and team. That's the reason why we see that stuff in red. When I think team, I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning. It's the group that is potentially traveling to represent Alfred State against other colleges and universities in those USA Archery, collegiate archery events. So that's a lot of information. Is it still recording? All right, perfect. So I'll be able to load this up, and that way I'll be able to refer this to people to see. That said, what questions do you have? You must have some. Somebody's got a question. You can stop. You can stop. Yes.
Do you think